Bardstown, Kentucky. July 3, 2015. The air was thick with summer heat, the kind that lingers long after sunset. Porch lights flickered on across the quiet streets, the last streaks of sunlight burning low over rolling farmland. Inside a modest home on Glenview Drive, Crystal Rogers was tapping through her phone. Auburn hair loose, tank top, shorts. She looked every bit like someone settling into a normal summer night. Her kids were scattered between family and friends for the weekend. The plan was simple: an evening with her longtime boyfriend, Brooks Houck. Brooks was a familiar figure in Bardstown, tall, soft-spoken, tied to a family with deep roots in the area. People who saw the two together thought they made sense. He was business-minded, steady. She was warm, fiercely loyal to her children, and impossible to mistake in a crowd. That evening, Brooks would later say, they drove out to his family's farm. The big open land stretched quietly under a deepening sky. Crystal sat in the shade, phone in hand, while Brooks worked. By his account, the night was unremarkable. They came back to town, returned to his home. He went to bed early. She stayed up, scrolling. Nothing unusual, but in reality, that would be the last time anyone outside of Brooks Houck would ever see Crystal alive. Morning brought a different picture. The 4th of July was underway. Small-town parades, flags on mailboxes, the smell of grilling in the air. But on the Bluegrass Parkway near mile marker 14, a maroon 2007 Chevy Impala sat on the shoulder. The driver's side door was unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse lay on the passenger seat. Her phone, too. No sign of Crystal. No footprints in the gravel. No signs of a struggle. Just a car abandoned in plain sight, under an endless blue sky. By afternoon, word spread quickly. Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, was already pacing, dialing, and demanding answers. Her daughter had 5 children. She would never just walk away. The car was towed. The scene is processed. But in those first critical hours, there was no search party combing the area, no helicopters sweeping the fields, just the slow churn of small-town rumor and the growing suspicion that something was deeply wrong. By the time the sun dipped below the hills that first night, the search for Crystal was already shaping into something different. Not a rescue, a recovery. Detectives wanted to speak with the last person who saw her, Brooks Houck. On camera, Brooks seemed calm. Too calm. He told investigators he'd gone to bed, woken up, and noticed Crystal wasn't home. He assumed she'd stayed out late. He didn't call her, didn't drive her car home from the parkway, didn't seem worried. The questions came gently at first, a missing persons case in a town where everyone knew everyone. But cracks began to show. In one interview, a detective leaned forward. "We think you know more than you're saying." Brooks didn't flinch. He looked at the detective like he'd been expecting that line. Then came the detail that would hang over the case like smoke. Nick Houck, Brooks' brother, a Bardstown police officer. When Nick learned investigators wanted to talk to Brooks, he called him, urged him not to cooperate, told him to protect himself. That phone call would later cost Nick his badge. Meanwhile, Sherry Ballard refused to stay quiet. She organized searches across Bardstown's sprawling farmland. Dozens of volunteers. Foot by foot, they walked creeks, climbed into barns, and combed through thickets. She brought dogs. She brought flyers. She brought news cameras. To her, the suspect was obvious. She didn't hide it. She told reporters, "He knows, and I'm not stopping until he tells us." But in Bardstown, speaking out against the Houck family meant inviting trouble. They were connected, respected by some, feared by others. By late summer, investigators had drained lakes, dug into remote fields, and searched the Houck family farm. Nothing. And then, Bardstown's past began to seep into the conversation. In 2013, Officer Jason Ellis was ambushed and shot to death while clearing debris from the highway, a murder still unsolved. In 2014, Kathy Netherland and her teenage daughter Samantha were brutally murdered in their home, also unsolved. Now, with Crystal gone, whispers began to knot the cases together. 3 major crimes, no arrests, and a growing sense that Bardstown was keeping secrets. By the fall of 2016, Crystal had been gone for more than a year. The searches were smaller now. Volunteers faded back to their lives. But Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, refused to stop. Every weekend, Tommy scoured the backroads of Nelson County, often with his grandson, Crystal's oldest boy, riding shotgun. To the community, Tommy was tireless. To the person who had taken his daughter, he was dangerous. November 19, 2016. Cold morning. Tommy, Crystal's father, met up with his family on his property to go hunting. The frost was still heavy on the grass. His grandson was by his side. They never made it into the woods. A single gunshot cracked the air. Tommy fell where he stood. Investigators called it a homicide. The shot came from the edge of the field, a distance away. No sign of the shooter. No suspect named. 2 major losses in 16 months. A mother missing. A father was murdered. 5 children are now without either parent in their lives. For Sherry, the grief was layered with something sharper. Certainty. She believed Tommy was silenced because he was close to finding the truth about Crystal. She said so publicly. And in Bardstown, speaking the truth out loud had a way of making people disappear. Detectives kept pressing Brooks Houck. Search warrants were served on his properties. A storage shed linked to him was raided. Evidence was taken, but charges never came. Witnesses said Brooks had been seen driving late the night Crystal vanished. A coworker claimed he'd been instructed to use a burn pile on the farm to destroy materials. But without a body, the case stalled. The years after Tommy's death were heavy with silence. Bardstown kept moving. Festivals, high school games, church on Sundays. But beneath it, everyone knew 2 crimes had cut deep into the heart of the town. And both were still unsolved. For nearly 7 years, Crystal Rogers' case sat in a kind of purgatory. Publicly, there was nothing. Privately, the FBI and Kentucky State Police were building something. In 2020, the FBI took over the investigation. New agents, new search warrants, drones scanned fields, cadaver dogs swept properties. Dozens of subpoenas were issued. It was the first sign in years that someone in authority was finally moving. But the real crack in the dam came in October 2023. A single headline jolted Bardstown. Brooks Houck arrested for the murder of Crystal Rogers. He was taken into custody on charges of murder and tampering with physical evidence. The man Sherry Ballard had pointed to from the beginning was finally in handcuffs. Court records laid out part of the case. Cell phone data placed Brooks in multiple key locations the night Crystal vanished. Witness statements describing suspicious behavior in the days after. Evidence that items had been burned. And though no body had been found, prosecutors were confident they could take him to trial. Then, in early 2024, another arrest, Joseph Lawson, charged with criminal conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with evidence. A man with ties to the Houck family, accused of helping in the crime. For the first time in almost a decade, it felt like the truth was no longer untouchable. The legal process moved slowly. Brooks pleaded not guilty. His defense team claimed the evidence was circumstantial. But in Bardstown, the arrest alone shifted something. It wasn't over. Not yet. But the silence had been broken. A murder trial without a body is a knife-edge gamble. Prosecutors must build the entire case on what they can prove happened, without the single piece of evidence that jurors expect most, the victim. For Crystal Rogers, the courtroom is set to become the battleground for nearly a decade of grief, suspicion, and whispers that have never left Bardstown. The prosecution's outline is already clear. Every phone ping, every movement, every contradiction in Brooks Houck's statements. They'll bring in the witnesses who heard Brooks urge workers to burn items on the Houck farm. They'll revisit the warnings from his brother, Officer Nick Houck, telling him not to speak to police, a breach that cost him his badge. And they'll remind the jury who Crystal was, a devoted mother of 5, a woman with no reason to disappear, and how every trail in the case leads back to the man who was supposed to love her. The defense will lean on the same word over and over, circumstantial. They'll argue there's no body, No direct eyewitness to a murder. They'll float the idea, however unlikely, that Crystal simply walked away. It will be a fight over the weight of shadows. In the gallery, Sherry Ballard will be there. She's been there for every hearing. Eyes locked on Brooks. Outside, the community still carries the weight of Bardstown's other ghosts. Officer Jason Ellis, Kathy and Samantha Netherland, Tommy Ballard. No one says they're connected. No one has to. The trial is set for 2025. There is no verdict yet. No resolution. Just a town still waiting to hear the truth spoken aloud, under oath for the first time. Nearly 10 years have passed since Crystal Rogers vanished. Her body has never been found. Her children have grown up in the shadow of unanswered questions. And Bardstown, Kentucky, once a quiet postcard of bourbon country, is now whispered about for something else entirely. For murders, one disappearance, none forgotten. Sherry Ballard's fight has never wavered. From searching farm fields in the blistering heat, to speak to reporters when no one else would, to sitting in a courtroom, staring down the man accused of killing her daughter. For her, this is more than justice. It's the only way to make sure Crystal's story doesn't fade into the long list of cold cases that never see trial. And yet, the deeper you look, the more you feel it. That heavy, unspoken fear that runs under Bardstown streets. A fear that what happened to Crystal wasn't isolated. Because in Bardstown, tragedy doesn't seem to come alone. Comes in chains. Now, the trial of Brooks Houck is set for 2025. The eyes of Kentucky and far beyond will be on that courtroom. A guilty verdict could finally give Crystal's family the truth they've been chasing. An acquittal could mean her disappearance remains a mystery forever. Either way, Bardstown's story isn't done. This is Trace of Evil, where shadows live and the truth never stays buried forever.